Good afternoon, everyone. I want to make a quick video on the author of this book called The Ringmakers of Saturn by Dr. Norman Berggren. If you look at his credentials, it's quite impressive. You can see here he went to Stanford University. He was a specialist in thermodynamics and engineering. He worked with companies like Lockheed Missile Space Company. He was a flight tester. He did testing on exit and re-entry operations associated with NASA. So he definitely has some good credentials. He also was part of the Presidential Task Force. And he got Engineer Award from California of the year when he was in charge of military and Navy functions. What he saw is in 1972, when Voyager went to Saturn to investigate what was causing the rings, he noticed in some pictures that there was mechanical-like structures and incomplete strands in the ringing. So he thought that was unusual. So after his studies of his pictures, he noticed very strong angular lines in some of the rings in the Cassini gap, which is named by the person who discovered that, and took a closer look. And he felt that this was somewhat of a geoengineered strata. And you can see here one of the rings of Saturn, and the ring just stopped and it would come and go. And this was also noted by Galileo back in 1979 with a crude rudimentary type of telescope. So you can see the structural angularity of the vehicle in the back. It's a tubular structure, and by creating magnetism with a electronic arm and emitting plasma balls that cause microcompression in a toroidal field and creating magnetism. So you can see here this is a little bit more detailed in his description on the craft that's at the center of the screen. Here is another image where he looks at a luminous force, and then that wishbone structure at the top is somewhat of that electrical magnetic arm that creates a toroidal field. So if you read his book, it's about 125 pages long. It's extremely interesting, and it somewhat explains some of the geoengineering, the chemtrails, and the crafts that we feel we're seeing with our sky pictures. There's just some pictures here from Voyager 2. That is a model of his craft. You can see the cylindrical tube. You see two outlet areas where the plasma balls or orbs are emitted, and then they start to braid, and that causes a positive negative field and a toroidal field and magnetism. And then there is where he discovered an incomplete ring with the NASA images from the Voyager. And just some more images here. And then here he takes a closer look at the arch of this perhaps a vehicle, which he calls electromagnetic vehicle. And then you can see the exhaust there. That is a picture of a ring. He hypothesizes that just like we take input, we need output. So as they're absorbing energy from the planet's surface and geoengineering and terraforming, the planet becomes smooth, but they have to emit the debris that is taken from the energy force derived from the electromagnetism of the planet on Saturn, and then that debris is ejected into its surrounding moons. And he also hypothesizes that some of the craters that we see on our moon, for example, are from debris fields from the electromagnetic vehicles that are going around not only Saturn, our planet, and they see rings on Uranus and Jupiter as well. Okay, here is another image of the Cassini division named after the founder. You can see the tubular structure here, the cylindrical tubule with a light source in the center, and then those outlets emit the plasma stream. Here is another diagram of the different rings of Saturn, and where you can see the luminous vehicles. Okay. Then he mentions some interesting things. Let me get to some of that dialogue. So for example here, he gives the diameters of these tubular structures. Some of them are as long as our moon. They circumvent the planet, and you can see it uses the power they derive to energize a long path of luminous visibility. And it's traced to this cylindrical vehicle that they saw on the Voyager 2 images. And if you look here, he believes that these electromagnetic cylinder structures are sources of massive power. And you can see that he feels that they were constructed deliberately as a potential for controlling weather. And he's 100% convinced that there is positive evidence that these type of vehicles are generating the rings of Saturn. And then you can see here in the diagram the tubules that he feels are building this ring, electromagnetic ring. That is a drawing of his, of what the vehicle supposedly may look like. You can see here, these are the debris fields from the output with the EMV production of the energy, and then the refuse that's deposited on the rings. You can see here, this is where he quotes that the Earth's moon somewhat fits the surface of the moons around Saturn because of these deep craters, which may be caused by the debris fields. This is a diagram image that he came up with, what he feels that these magnetic vehicles look like. You can see that we do have random crater formations on the lunar surface with electric currents which are from the vehicle to the surface. And you can see the tiny craters which are pierced by foreign material. And if you look here, his conclusion is that the moon perhaps has experienced the same treatment as the moon, one of the moons of Saturn, and that he feels that these electromagnetic vehicles are connected to lunar formation. And then his perspective is the existence of extraterrestrial space vehicles of enormous size and power is a fact, and the significance of which is difficult for us to grasp. However, if you're part of the woke family, you have suspected this for quite some time. These electromagnetic vehicles represent ultra-superlative achievements in nuclear physics, aeronautics, astronautics, and the long-term goal of a self-destructing society. So you can just read through here. He feels that in I believe it was 1909 or 1907, Russia had an event in the Tunguska area that looked very akin to a nuclear blast. However, there was no nuclear energy or bombs at that time. It flattened all the trees, all the animals died, but there was no debris of a meteorite ever found. So he is speculating that perhaps one of these large electromagnetic vehicles may have exploded in the stratosphere and causing an intense nuclear-type blast. So that's also very interesting. And then you can see here, they had another event in 1979 that was documented between South Africa and the Antarctic, and they caught that on satellite imaging. However, no nuclear blast had gone off at that time. They ruled out being a comet. However, the findings were suggestive of a nuclear blast, so he suspects that this was another EMV that may have dislodged. So we can see here, he built a diagram. You can see the tubular structure. It has fluorescent lights on each end. Over here in the yellow area, you can see the blue flame fuel that's emitted. And then at the top, you can see the plasma streams, which are like plasma orbs. And the flat lines in between is where they're compressing the energy and creating that toroidal field. And then when you bend those streamers at a right angle, it almost creates like a cloaking technology. He says these plasma orbs are filled with chlorine. He believes they're affecting the ozone, perhaps causing acid rain, holes in the ozone, and affecting the weather. So he says this device can also be used for weather manipulation, such as creating tornadoes or hurricanes. That is his perspective drawing of what one of these EMVs may look like. After he feels he saw something in California near Santa Cruz. That is the plasma stream that's being emitted from the cylindrical tube. That is a picture that he took of a craft he suspected he saw in 1972. This is just a ship that had wrecked, and he was so talented with his skills as far as latitude, longitude. He was able to find this craft for the military and to the pinpoint of where it was. And then you can see here some of the different rings. Again, the Encke division, the Cassini division, those are named after the founders who discovered the rings with their telescope. And you can see the luminous source. And then he's saying that Saturn is about as wide as about 12 Earths, and so the rings are about 2 or 3 moons of our moons. And then you can see this is a ring of Saturn. And in the bottom here, I outlined that cylindrical tube. You can see the light source here where the blue flame is coming out. You can see the production of the streamers, and that creates that toroidal field and somewhat of a cloud cover or a type of a stratosphere. Here's another picture here showing the streamers and the light source. And then you can see these bodies here within the rings of Saturn, which actually look like what we've been calling HAARP waves that are emitted. And then here you can see the electromagnetic arm that generates the magnetism, and then the plasma is emitted, and it directs the current of the plasma orbs in the direction they want to face it. Here's a crude diagram of one of the cylinders with the toroidal fields around that cylinder. Okay, and this is where you can see that those plasma streams have directed energy from that electric magnetic arm that bends and refracts those streams, and it creates a cloaking cover. That cover is surrounded by clouds. Those are some possible UFOs using this method. This is a picture that Andrew, or Boogeyman, took over the weekend, and you can see the nose of the craft, you can see the electric arm, you can see the plasma stream waves there, and that looks very much like that picture here on his diagram from Saturn. Let's look at that again. Okay. And then again, that's a cursory drawing of what he suspects the device may look like. That is something I took a few days ago. You can see the energy coming off of this tubular area. And then here we see those waves, which look like HAARP waves, but they actually may be streamers of electromagnetism. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. This is a very good book to read. It's an easy read. He does use a lot of technical terms, but I think that if you're interested in sky watching and you feel that you may have been catching crafts, this would be something very interesting to read. And his final comment is that he feels that the planet is being terraformed, that somehow either they're creating a ring around the Earth in our stratosphere for communication, maybe transfer of technology or to make contact, or for weather warfares and geoengineering. So I hope you found this interesting. Sorry about my crackling voice. I'm a little nervous. This is the first time I've made a video without music, and hopefully I can attempt to do this again. Thank you.